The roast chicken grew cold as Melissa launched into her rehearsed speech. We sat in my dining room, the same one where I'd celebrated every birthday, every holiday with her since she was born. Now she looked at me like I was a confused child who needed supervision. "Dad, we've been talking," she began, glancing at Brandon for support. "You're 68 now. Managing investments, paying bills, tracking expenses. It's too much for someone your age." Brandon nodded, his slick back hair catching the chandelier light. "We just want to help. Frank, take the burden off your shoulders." I set down my fork carefully. "I see. We consulted with a financial advisor," Melissa continued, pulling out a stack of documents. "The best thing is to transfer everything into a trust. I'll be the primary trustee. You'll have a monthly allowance for necessities." Monthly allowance. The words hit like a slap. I'd built a successful accounting firm from nothing, put this woman through college, help with her wedding. Now I need an allowance? And if I say no? I asked quietly. Brandon's smile tightened. Then we'd have to consider other options. Legal options, if your judgment is impaired. The threat hung in the air. Sign willingly or be declared incompetent. Melissa wouldn't meet my eyes. I pulled the papers closer and picked up my pen. After they left, I sat in Dorothy's old study, surrounded by her books and the faint scent of her lavender perfume that somehow still lingered after 3 years. Her photograph smiled at me from the mahogany desk, that same warm smile that had seen me through 40 years of marriage. "They think I'm a fool," I whispered her picture. I spread the documents across the desk, reading them again by lamplight. Melissa had been thorough. I'd give her that. Power of attorney, trust agreement, account transfers. Everything designed to give her complete control. But there was something she'd missed. A small clause on page 7, buried in legal language. It referenced the Dalton Family Trust, the one Dorothy and I had established years ago, the one with very specific conditions for distribution. I picked up my phone and texted my lawyer, Harold. She signed. "Proceed as planned." His reply came immediately. "Are you certain?" I looked at Dorothy's photo again. She'd always said trust had to be earned, not assumed. "Yes, let her learn." I smiled faintly for the first time that evening. 2 days later, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. Melissa's voice was sharp with panic. "Dad, where's the rest of the money?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "What do you mean?" "The transfer from your savings account. It only shows $43,000. Your financial statements last year showed over $800,000. I set down my cup. "The rest is safe." "Safe where?" "Dad, I need to see all the accounts." That was the whole point of this arrangement. "You have access to everything you need," I said calmly. The trust documents were very clear about which assets transfer. Brandon's voice cut in from the background. "This is fraud, Frank. You deliberately hid assets before signing." "I hid nothing," I replied. "Every account listed in the documents transferred exactly as specified. If you didn't ask about other accounts, that's not my problem." Melissa's breathing quickened. "Dad, please, just tell me where the money is." "It's safe," I repeated. "That's all you need to know." Brandon's voice grew louder. "We'll sort this out legally, old man. Count on it." I hung up and returned to my breakfast. Let them try. Harold arrived at my house that afternoon, his briefcase weathered from 40 years of practice. We'd been friends since college, and he was one of the few people who knew the full extent of my planning. "The trust documents are ironclad," he confirmed, settling into Dorothy's favorite armchair. "Everything transferred exactly as you specified. The Dalton Trust maintains control of your primary assets. And the trustee designation?" I asked, clear as crystal. Melissa signed her acknowledgement that all financial decisions require the trustee's written consent. I nodded slowly. "She doesn't know yet, does she? That she's not the trustee." Harold's eyes twinkled. "The trust names me as primary trustee until your death. Only then does control pass to your designated heir, assuming they've met the conditions." Which Melissa hasn't read carefully enough to understand. Apparently not. Harold pulled out another document. "Now, about the property transfers you requested." We spent the next hour reviewing paperwork, each signature another piece falling into place. When Harold left, he paused at the door. "Frank, are you sure about this? She's still your daughter." I thought of Melissa's cold eyes at dinner, Brandon's smug smile. That's exactly why I'm doing it. Within a week, Melissa had moved into full control mode. She started with small things, questioning my grocery purchases, suggesting I didn't need cable television, recommending cheaper brands of coffee. "Dad, you're spending too freely," she said during her daily check-in call. "Your monthly allowance is for essentials only." "I've been drinking the same coffee for 30 years, I replied. "Well, times change." Brandon found a generic brand that's half the price. Then came the house visits. She walked through my home with a critical eye, pointing at Dorothy's antique furniture, the family photographs, the comfortable clutter of a life well lived. "This place needs updating," she declared. "Everything's so dated." She hired decorators without asking. They removed Dorothy's watercolors from the walls, replaced her handmade quilts with modern throws. I watched silently as they boxed up our memories. But when they reached for the old house deed framed on the wall, I quietly slipped it from their hands. "I'll handle this one," I said, tucking it into my jacket. Nobody noticed. The dinner party was Brandon's idea, a celebration of his latest business deal. He'd invited colleagues and clients to what he now called our family estate, meaning my home. I was introduced to each guest the same way. "This is Frank, Melissa's father. Retired. Of course, just enjoying his golden years." I smiled and shook hands, playing the role of the gentle old man. Over cocktails, I drifted near Brandon and his business partner, a sharp-faced man named Vincent. "The old man's assets were the final piece," Brandon was saying, voice low but confident. "Once we consolidate everything, we can leverage it for the expansion." Vincent glanced at me. "What about him?" Brandon laughed. "He doesn't understand half of what's happening. Melissa handles everything now." They toasted their future success, champagne glasses clinking. I stood nearby, apparently absorbed in my drink, apparently deaf to their scheming. At dinner, Melissa raised her glass. "To new beginnings and proper financial management." Everyone drank. I waited until the room quieted, then clinked my glass gently. "Funny thing about plans," I said into the silence. "They tend to change." Brandon's smile flickered. Several guests looked confused, but I just returned to my meal, leaving my words hanging in the air like smoke. The Riverside Credit Union sat on Main Street, unchanged since Dorothy, and I had first opened accounts there 45 years ago. I'd volunteered on their board for 2 decades, helping local families understand mortgages and retirement planning. Carol, the branch manager, greeted me with a warm hug. "Frank, it's been too long." "I've been busy," I said, settling into her office. "I need to discuss some investment transfers." Her smile faded to professional concern. "Is everything all right? I heard Melissa was helping with your finances now." "That's what I need to talk about. Confidentially." We spent an hour reviewing accounts Melissa didn't know existed. Dorothy's life insurance payout, invested carefully over 3 years. The proceeds from selling my firm, strategically placed in bonds and stocks. The small rental properties I'd acquired decades ago. "I want to move everything into a restricted access account," I explained. "Only Harold and I have withdrawal privileges." Carol nodded, typing quickly. "And if someone inquires about these assets, they don't exist in any database Melissa has access to." "Done." She printed the forms. "Frank, can I ask what's happening?" I thought about how to explain. "My daughter thinks I'm too old to handle money. I'm teaching her what old really means." Carol signed as witness. "Your wife will be proud." I signed the final form. "I hope so." The next 2 weeks, I spent sorting through 40 years of accumulated paperwork. Property titles emerged from filing cabinets. Life insurance policies, some I'd forgotten about. Stock certificates from companies Dorothy had believed in, now worth substantial amounts. I created 3 piles: Documents Melissa knew about, documents she didn't, and documents that would surprise her. The property titles went into safety deposit boxes Harold controlled. The life insurance policies were reassigned with new beneficiaries. Dorothy's art collection, purchased piece by piece over decades, was quietly moved to a secure storage facility. Each evening, I updated a master list, cross-referencing everything with Harold's records. Melissa called daily, asking questions about medications, appointments, bills. I answered patiently, never mentioning the real work happening in Dorothy's study. When the reorganization was complete, I called Harold one final time. I want to make an update to the trust. I said, another change? Harold sounded amused. A clarification. Melissa needs to understand exactly what she's inherited. What do you have in mind? I explained my plan. Harold was silent for a long moment. Frank, that's brilliant. And perfectly legal. That's all that matters. We scheduled a meeting for the following week. My 69th birthday fell on a Saturday. Melissa insisted on hosting a party at my house, though she decorated it so thoroughly I barely recognized the space. Modern furniture filled Dorothy's sitting room. Abstract paintings hung where family photos had been. Even the garden was different, replanted with ornamental grasses instead of Dorothy's roses. Brandon worked the room like a politician, introducing guests to our home and our hospitality. Melissa glowed beside him, playing the dutiful daughter who'd taken on the burden of her aging father. At the cake cutting, she raised her champagne glass. To Dad, she announced the crowd, and to finally making sure his assets are properly managed. No more confusion, no more worry. Everything's under control now. Everyone applauded. I stood beside the cake, candles flickering. Thank you, sweetheart. I said clearly, you'll get exactly what's coming to you. The room laughed, thinking it was a grateful father's promise. But Melissa caught my tone. Her smile wavered. Brandon's face hardened just for a second. He'd heard it too. I blew out the candles. Nobody asked what I'd wished for. 3 weeks after my birthday, Brandon and Melissa arrived at my door unannounced. Brandon carried a leather folder, his expression carefully casual. Dad, we have an exciting opportunity, Melissa began, settling onto the couch without invitation. Brandon's firm is expanding into 3 new markets. Brandon spread papers across the coffee table. We need additional capital. Just $50,000 for 6 months. The returns will be substantial. I studied the documents. This is a business loan application. Right. We just need you to co-sign. Formality, really. Your assets make it easier to secure favorable terms. You want to borrow against my assets. Against the trust assets, Brandon corrected, which Melissa manages. But the bank requires your signature as the trust's original founder. I pretended to read carefully. Of course, if my trustee approves. They exchanged glances. Melissa frowned. What trustee? The trust trustee. You did read the documents before signing, didn't you? I am the trustee, Melissa said slowly. I shook my head. You're the potential beneficiary. The trustee is the person who makes all financial... That's correct. So the monthly allowance you're receiving is determined by Harold based on the trust guidelines. You signed authorization for him to make those decisions. Melissa sank into a chair. I don't get anything until you die. The bluntness hurt, but I kept my face calm. Even then, there are conditions. Harold will explain when the time comes. What conditions? The trust is very specific about the character requirements for inheritance. Your mother and I designed it carefully. Mom knew about this? I met her eyes. Your mother knew exactly what kind of person you were becoming. She just hoped you'd change before it was too late. Melissa flinched as if I'd struck her. For a moment, I saw the little girl who used to help Dorothy plant roses, who'd cried at her mother's funeral and promised to make her proud. Then her face hardened. Well, Sue, this is undue influence, manipulation. Harold predicted you'd say that. Feel free to try. The documents are ironclad, and you authorized everything yourself. She stood abruptly. I hate you. No, I said quietly. You hate that I'm not as foolish as you thought. Brandon pushed for litigation immediately. Over the next month, They consulted 3 different attorneys. Each gave the same assessment. The trust was legally sound, and Melissa had signed voluntary authorization for its terms. Their third lawyer, an aggressive young woman named Patricia, actually called Harold to negotiate. "My clients feel they were misled about the trust structure," she began. Harold put her on speaker so I could listen from his office. "Did Mr. Dalton falsify any information?" "No, but—" "Did he prevent your clients from reading the documents?" "Of course not, but the complexity. The trust agreement is written in standard legal language, reviewed by your client's attorney before signing. Where's the grounds for complaint?" Patricia tried a different angle. "Mr. Dalton is elderly. There could be concerns about his mental capacity when establishing the trust." "The trust was established 17 years ago," Harold said smoothly, "when Mr. Dalton was 51 and his late wife Dorothy was alive. Both were evaluated by independent physicians as part of the documentation. Would you like to see those records?" A pause. "That won't be necessary." "Excellent. Please inform your clients that any further harassment of Mr. Dalton will result in a countersuit for elder abuse and financial exploitation." Patricia hung up. Harold turned to me. "That should discourage them." "Or make them desperate," I said. I was right. 2 days later, I heard unfamiliar voices in my house. I came downstairs to find Melissa directing movers, pointing at furniture, barking instructions. "What's going on?" I asked. She spun to face me. "We're moving. You said I control the household budget." "Well, this house is too expensive to maintain. We're downsizing." "Melissa, this is my home." "Not according to the trust. The property is an asset under trustee control. Harold approved the sale to cover trust expenses." I felt my heartbeat quicken. "You spoke to Harold?" Brandon appeared from the kitchen. "We reached an arrangement. The house sells. Proceeds go to the trust, and we move somewhere more economical." For a moment, I almost believed them. Then I remembered the document I'd quietly removed weeks ago. "Did Harold see the property deed?" I asked. "Of course. It's all documented in the trust." I walked to my study, retrieved the framed deed from behind a stack of books, and returned to the living room. I held it up so they could read it. "This is the original deed," I said. "Transferred to a separate trust 1 week before you had me sign your documents. This house was never part of what you control." The movers stopped working, sensing the shift in the room. Brandon grabbed the deed, examining it frantically. "This is impossible. Check with county records. The transfer is registered." Melissa looked between us. "You can have." "I can." I did. I turned to the movers. "Gentlemen, I apologize for wasting your time. There's been a misunderstanding. No one is moving today." They left quickly, eager to escape the tension. Melissa stood speechless in what she tried to steal. "Get out," I said quietly. "Both of you." They left without another word. The real consequences arrived by certified mail a week later. Brandon's business partner Vincent had used guaranteed collateral to secure their expansion loan. That collateral was supposedly the assets under Melissa's control, assets that would pass to Brandon through marriage. The bank, performing due diligence, had contacted Harold to verify the collateral's value and availability. Harold had informed them, truthfully, that no such assets existed under Melissa or Brandon's control. The bank's letter was coldly professional. "Upon discovery that claimed collateral does not exist as represented, we require immediate repayment of the advanced funds in the amount of $240,000. Failure to repay within 30 days will result in legal action for fraud and loan default." Harold showed me the copy he'd received. "They're ruined unless they can produce that money." "Can they?" "Brandon's firm is over-leveraged. Melissa has no personal savings. They gambled everything on accessing your assets." I stared at the letter. $250,000 they didn't have, couldn't get, and had spent based on lies. Part of me felt sick. Another part felt vindicated. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Harold said, "they learn what consequences feel like. Small towns thrive on gossip, and Riverside was no exception. Within days, everyone knew Brandon's firm was in trouble. The bank's investigation expanded to include all their recent deals, questioning whether other transactions had involved misrepresented collateral. I first heard the whispers at the pharmacy. Two women in the next aisle didn't know I could hear them. Melissa's husband is under investigation. Something about fraud. I always thought he was too slick. Poor Frank. Imagine your own daughter stealing from you. At the coffee shop, conversation stopped when I entered. People smiled sympathetically, but their eyes held questions. I ordered my usual and sat by the window, watching Main Street bustle with life. My phone rang. My old friend Theodore from Town Hall. Frank, I heard what happened. Are you all right? I'm fine, Theodore. The whole town's talking. Brandon's firm might lose its business license. The ethics board is reviewing complaints. I sip my coffee. That's unfortunate. Unfortunate? Frank, you outplayed them completely. Half the town is saying you're a genius. The other half thinks you're too harsh. What do you think? Theodore was quiet. I think you did what you had to do. But Frank, be careful. Desperate people do desperate things. I thanked him and hung up, watching people pass by my window. Normal lives, normal problems. I missed normal. Melissa appeared at my door 3 weeks after the loan revelation. She looked different. Thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. No makeup, no expensive clothes. Just my daughter, broken. Can we talk? She asked. I stepped aside to let her in. We sat in the living room, silence heavy between us. You've ruined my life, she said finally. No anger, just exhaustion. No, I replied. You ruined your own life when you stopped trusting the man who raised you. I was trying to help. By taking control? By treating me like an incompetent child. I shook my head. You wanted my money, Melissa. Let's be honest. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Brandon said it was smart planning. That you'd mess things up, lose it all. That we were protecting the family. What family? You took away my dignity, my home, my choices. I'm sorry. The words came out broken. I'm so sorry, Dad. I wanted to hug her, to fix everything like I had when she was small. But I couldn't. Not yet. Brandon's firm is collapsing, she continued. The investigation found other irregularities. He might face criminal charges. Our house is being foreclosed. I have nothing. You have what you earned, I said quietly. She looked up at me, mascara streaking. Do you hate me? My own eyes grew wet. No, but I'm deeply disappointed. Your mother would be heartbroken. Melissa sobbed, and this time I did move to her, holding my daughter as she cried. But when she left an hour later, I didn't offer solutions. She needed to feel this, to understand what she'd done. Harold and I met again the following week to discuss the final piece of my plan. I thought long and hard about punishment versus redemption, revenge versus teaching. I want to revise my will, I told him. He pulled out his notepad. Go on. Melissa can still inherit everything, but only after completing certain conditions. What kind of conditions? 500 hours of volunteer work at Riverside Senior Care Center, documented and verified. Harold wrote it down. That's interesting. Why? She called me too old to handle my own affairs. I've been working at the center for 6 months now. Some of those residents have forgotten their own names, but they built businesses, raised families, survived wars. They're not incompetent. They're just old. And you thought I was heading there? She looked ashamed. Brandon convinced me you were declining, making poor decisions. I was so focused on the money, I never stopped to question if it was true. You could have just asked me, Melissa, talk to me like an adult. I know. I'm sorry. We sat in silence, sipping our drinks. Finally, she spoke again. The residents at the center ask about you sometimes. They remember you from the board meetings, from when you visited Dorothy there before she died. I nodded. She spent her last month there. Best care available. I've forgotten that. Melissa's voice cracked. How much you sacrificed to give her comfort. How you visited every single day, even though it broke your heart. That's what love looks like, I said quietly. She wiped her eyes. Can I help with your grocery list? Or drive you to appointments? I want to help for real this time. I considered it, then shook my head gently. Not yet. I've got it for now. I understand. She gathered her purse. I'll keep trying. As she left, I felt something shift. Not forgiveness yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Brandon's trial was brief and decisive. With evidence of systematic embezzlement spanning 3 years, his defense collapsed quickly. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison and ordered full restitution to the defrauded clients. His firm dissolved within days. Business partners scrambled to distance themselves. The house they'd lost in foreclosure sold at auction. Everything they'd built on deception evaporated like morning fog. Melissa attended the sentencing, but didn't testify on his behalf. When Brandon looked at her from the defendant's table, she looked away. She came to my house that evening, the first time in months. I'd slowly been restoring Dorothy's decorations, bringing back the quilts and watercolors. It's over, she said simply. Brandon's gone. The life we built is gone. I'm $27,000 in debt and living in a studio apartment. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Don't be. This is exactly what I deserve. She looked around the familiar room. Can I ask you something? Of course. When did you know? When did you realize what Brandon and I were planning? I thought back. The first time Brandon suggested helping with my finances. The way he talked about assets, leverage, opportunities. He saw dollar signs, not family. And you let us proceed anyway. I hoped you'd choose differently, that you'd see through him. But you didn't, so I had to protect myself. Melissa nodded slowly. Thank you for that. For being smarter than we were greedy. As autumn turned to winter, Melissa and I developed a new rhythm. She came for dinner every Sunday, helping cook the recipes Dorothy had perfected. We didn't talk about money or the past. Instead, we discussed her work at the care center, the residents she'd grown to love, the lessons she was learning. One Sunday, after washing dishes, she grew quiet. Mrs. Patterson died yesterday, she said. One of the residents I'd been helping. I'm sorry. Her family came for the funeral. They hadn't visited in 2 years, but they showed up to fight over her jewelry. Melissa's voice hardened with anger. She died alone because they couldn't be bothered to visit, and then they argued over her things before she was even buried. That happens sometimes. It's horrible. She was a person, not an inheritance. Melissa looked at me. Is that how you felt? Like I only cared about what you leave behind. I measure my words carefully. Sometimes, yes. She nodded, accepting the truth. I won't be like them. I'm at 600 hours now, more than you were required. I'm going to finish the full 1,000 the judge ordered. Why? Because it's not about inheriting anymore. It's about becoming someone Mom would recognize. I felt my throat tighten. She'd be proud of that. As Melissa left that evening, she paused at the door. Dad? I saw the trust documents on Harold's desk last week when I dropped off my community service verification. You've added someone back as co-trustee. Harold talks too much, I said. Is it me? I met her eyes. Only if you complete your hours and commit to never using trust assets for business ventures. That's the condition. I accept. Her voice was firm. Thank you for giving me another chance. Spring arrived with Dorothy's roses blooming again. I'd replanted them myself over the winter, returning the garden to the way she designed it. Pink, yellow, and red blossoms filled the air with fragrance. Melissa visited on a Saturday morning, finding me working in the garden. She knelt beside me, and together we pruned and watered, falling into an easy silence. I found something, she said eventually, pulling an envelope from her pocket. In your desk drawer when I was helping you file last week's bills. It's labeled Final Instructions. I recognized my own handwriting on the envelope. I meant for you to find that eventually. Can I read it now? If you'd like. She opened it carefully, unfolding the handwritten letter inside. I watched her face as she read my words, written months ago when the pain of her betrayal was still fresh. Money isn't power. Character is. Assets don't define worth. Integrity does. I pray you learn this before it's too late. Dad. Tears streaked down her face. I understand now. Do you? Money is just paper and numbers. What matters is who you are when no one's watching, how you treat people who can't benefit you, whether you can look at yourself honestly. She wiped her eyes. Mom taught you that, didn't she? She did, and I failed to teach it to you. No, Dad, you taught me perfectly. I just wasn't listening. We finished the garden work together, and for the first time in over a year, I felt hopeful about our future. 3 months later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Melissa completed her 1,000th hour at Riverside Senior Care Center. Harold, the center director, and I attended a small ceremony in the recreation room. The residents had organized it themselves, streamers, cake, and a handmade banner reading, "Congratulations, Melissa." She cried to the whole thing. Afterward, Harold asked her to his office. I followed, knowing what was coming. "Miss Dalton," Harold began formally, "your community service obligation is fulfilled. Additionally, you've completed the volunteer requirements in your father's revised will." He slid a document across the desk. "This is the updated Dalton Family Trust Agreement. As of today, you're designated as co-trustee alongside me. Your father will retain final authority during his lifetime, but you'll have input on decisions and full transparency into all assets." Melissa's hand shook as she picked up the document. "I don't understand." The will said 500 hours. I did 1,000 because the court required it. The will was my minimum requirement. I explained. Harold and I agreed that finishing your court obligation showed genuine commitment, not just completing a checklist for inheritance. She looked between us. What if I'd done exactly 500 and stopped? Then you would have met the retry. I continue. Letter of the requirement, but not the spirit, Harold said. Your father wanted to see real change. Melissa turned to me. And you think I've changed? I think you're trying. That's what matters. She read through the document slowly, tears dropping onto the pages. When she reached the signature line, she looked up. There are conditions here. I can never use trust assets for business investments. I must maintain employment or volunteer work. I have to submit annual financial disclosures. That's right, I confirmed. The trust exists to provide security, not to fund risky ventures. Can you accept those terms? Yes. She signed with shaking hands. Thank you, Dad, for not giving up on me. Harold witnessed the signature and sealed the document. Congratulations, Miss Dalton. You're now co-trustee of a substantial estate. As we left his office, Melissa hugged me tightly. I won't let you down again. I know, I said, holding my daughter close. I believe you. 6 months later, I stood in Dorothy's garden with Melissa, admiring the roses in full bloom. The summer sun warmed our faces as we worked side by side, exactly as Dorothy and I had done for 40 years. Remember when you said I was too old to handle my finances? I asked, pruning a yellow rose. Melissa winced. Every single day. It was the stupidest thing I've ever said. Not stupid, just young and misguided. I handed her the pruning shears. Want to know something funny? What's that? The whole trust structure, the conditions, the volunteer requirements, your mother and I designed all of it 15 years ago. We knew that someday you might need a wake-up call. She stopped pruning. Mom knew I'd try to take over. She knew you inherited my stubbornness, and Brandon would exploit your insecurities. She made me promise that if it happened, I'd teach you the right way. By letting me fail? By letting you face consequences. I smiled at her. Your mother was brilliant that way. She knew the difference between helping and enabling. Melissa set down the shears and hugged me. I miss her so much. Me too. But I see her in you now, in the person you're becoming. We returned to the roses, working in comfortable silence. A car pulled up. Melissa's new used sedan, purchase of her own savings from her new job at the care center. She'd been promoted to activities coordinator, planning events and programs for the residents. I should get going, she said, checking her watch. Book club starts in an hour. Mrs. Chen always gets anxious if I'm late. Will you come for dinner Sunday? Wouldn't miss it. She kissed my cheek. Love you, Dad. Love you too, sweetheart. As she drove away, I turned back to garden. Dorothy's roses swayed in the breeze, their fragrance filling the air. Somewhere, I felt her smiling. I kept my promise. I whispered. She learned the value of everything, especially family. A petal fell at my feet, pink and perfect. I picked it up, holding it to the light. Teaching Melissa hadn't been about revenge or punishment. It had been about showing her that dignity, character, and wisdom couldn't be measured in dollars. I'd never broken a law, never sought vengeance, just struck to the truth, so it revealed greed for what it was. My patience had won everything back. My daughter's respect, her genuine love, and most importantly, her integrity. The papers I'd let her sign hadn't changed everything for her. They'd changed everything for both of us. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is the space to fail, the consequences to learn, and the grace to try again. I walked back inside, leaving the garden gate open. Dorothy always said an open gate meant welcome. Melissa would return Sunday, and we'd cook together, laugh together, heal together. That was worth more than any trust fund ever could be.